New York never sleeps. But on the highest floor of a glass tower in Manhattan, where the city lights couldn't chase away the loneliness, one camera remained glowing in the dark. The footage showed a young woman on her knees in a shadowed room, clutching a man's coat to her chest, tears spilling silently down a face carved by unspoken sorrow. Elena Rivera, 19, a special care worker. But in this moment, she was just a bare soul, seen more deeply than ever before. Across the city, Nathaniel Cross, the cold, calculated CEO of a high-tech security firm, sat in his penthouse. The screen before him streamed the live image. And strangely, he couldn't look away. Not because of a rule being broken, but because for the first time in years, his heart stirred, not from data, not from dominance, but from a human being crying. Because of him, because of a feeling he didn't yet know how to name. Sometimes being seen is the most terrifying thing, but maybe it's also the only way out. Elena Rivera never imagined her life would lead her here, standing before a glass skyscraper in Manhattan where the world below looked like nothing more than a blur behind its icy steel and shimmer. 19, no parents, no family, no one but herself. Elena had grown up in New York's foster system, moving from one group home to another, but the one thing she never lost was her patience, and her gentle way with children broken in the same places she had been. That's how she landed this interview. Crosstech wasn't just known for its elite security systems. It was also whispered about because of its reclusive founder, Nathaniel Cross, a billionaire with a reputation as impenetrable as the glass he lived behind. After his wife's sudden death 2 years ago, he disappeared from public life, retreating to the top floors of his tower with his 4-year-old son Leo, a child who hadn't spoken a word since the funeral. Elena was invited to interview for the role of therapeutic companion, part caregiver, part emotional support, thanks to her hands-on experience with neurodivergent and trauma-affected kids at local centers. Still, as she looked up at the cold tower, she wondered what exactly she was walking into. The sliding glass doors whispered open. Inside, the marble-floored lobby was eerily silent, lit in soft white but devoid of warmth. A silver-haired woman in a black tailored suit approached. "Miss Riviera?" "Yes." "I'm Mrs. Whitmore, chief housekeeper. Please follow me." They rode in silence to the 72nd floor. The elevator was noiseless, each floor number glowing red like quiet warning signs. Nathaniel's office looked like something out of a dystopian control center. Dark wood floors, tall ceilings, and an entire wall of surveillance monitors displaying every corner of the tower. He sat behind a steel and glass desk, tall, straight, unreadable. He didn't glance up as they entered. This was Elena's first time seeing him in person, 37. Devastatingly handsome in an austere way. Fair skin, eyes sharp like surgical blades. A white shirt so crisp it made the room feel clumsy. "Sit," he said without looking up. She obeyed, hands folded tightly in her lap. He didn't speak much, confirmed Leo required specialized attention, that every room except bathrooms and her bedroom was monitored 24/7, and finally, "This office is restricted. Do not enter unless I call for you." "Understood," Elena nodded, her voice soft, as if vowing to herself. She didn't know exactly what she'd stepped into, but it wasn't a home. It was a fortress. And Nathaniel Cross was the man guarding its doors of steel. The apartment, hidden behind Nathaniel's executive floor, was unlike anywhere Elena had ever been. There were no family portraits, no art, no trace of childhood. Only pristine white walls, sleek furniture, and a silence so heavy it felt like time itself had been locked out. Her room was private, minimally furnished yet comfortable. It sat just down the hall from Leo's, the boy she hadn't met but whose name felt heavy in the files she'd read, described as low reactivity, nonverbal, emotionally unresponsive. Elena set her bag down and stepped into the corridor. From the ceiling, a small camera turned slowly toward her. A red light blinked. A gaze, a warning. This house saw everything, heard everything, remembered everything. She began her duties in silence, The staff were few, polite but distant, avoiding her eyes more often than not. She wondered if they all lived under the same invisible fear. She quickly adjusted to the rigid routines and strict rules. Leo, the 4-year-old she'd been hired to care for, hardly spoke a word. But he watched, always watched her, with wide, dark brown eyes that seemed to search her soul. Elena did everything to make him feel safe, told stories, built towers of blocks, hummed lullabies at bedtime. But at night, when the silence settled over the house like fog, it was she who needed comfort the most. One evening, after putting Leo to sleep, Elena meant to return to her room. Instead, she stopped in front of Nathaniel's office. Strangely, the door was unlocked. Her heartbeat quickened as she stepped inside. She didn't turn on the lights. The surveillance monitors still glowed a soft blue. The room looked different in the dark, less intimidating, almost intimate. On the chair lay his coat. She picked it up, pressing it to her chest in an unconscious gesture. Tears came without warning. No sobs, just quiet drops of exhaustion, of pain, of something unnamed she'd been trying so hard not to feel. "Why are you like this?" she whispered, barely audible. "So cold. It hurts." In the upper corner of the room, a camera rotated slightly. A red light blinked, steady like a mechanical heartbeat. Elena had no idea she was being seen again when the image appeared on his screen, Elena clutching his coat, her slender shoulders trembling in the dark. Nathaniel didn't just see a girl crying. He saw himself. He remembered the night he got the call about his wife. The apartment had been silent, wind scraping against the tall windows. He'd stood there for hours, no tears, no sound, but inside, everything collapsed. And now, in front of him, was a soul breaking, quietly, without demand, without drama, just the simple act of hurting. Elena didn't know she was being watched. It wasn't a performance, it was raw truth. And perhaps that's what hurt the most. Nathaniel was used to seeing people through lenses, behavior, reaction, data. But Elena, she couldn't be quantified. She made him feel again, and feeling was something he'd buried long ago. In that moment, he knew if he kept watching, he wouldn't be able to look away. After that night, no one said a word, no one asked, but everything changed. Nathaniel began showing up in the mornings, in the kitchen. Not to do anything, just to lean against the counter, coffee in hand, silently watching Elena prepare breakfast for Leo. When she asked, "Do you usually eat breakfast at home?" he replied, "Never, but maybe I should start." That sentence made her drop the spoon. He bent down at the same time to pick it up. Their hands touched. Just a brush, but it was enough for a current to rush down her spine. Leo, who had been silent for months, entered the kitchen moments later. "Daddy?" a fragile voice whispered. Elena turned, her breath catching. Nathaniel froze. Then, with effort, he knelt. "Good morning, champ." For the first time, his voice carried warmth. Not cold, not calculated. From then on, he passed by the playroom more often when Elena was there. Always accidental, always just passing. But his eyes lingered longer than necessary. She could feel it. One afternoon, she was reading a story to Leo. And then, the prince turned into a statue of ice, his heart frozen so deeply that no one could reach it. She didn't know Nathaniel was standing in the doorway, listening, and his eyes were no longer stone. He thought back to that night, Elena clutching his coat, whispering his name like a prayer. It wasn't just a moment of emotion, it was a message, a faint signal from a forgotten heart. And for Nathaniel, who lived in a world of control and logic, it was the first rupture. A silent shift, but strong enough to fracture the frost that had gripped his chest for years. That seemingly harmless silence shattered on a gray afternoon. Elena had just put Leo down for his nap when Mrs. Whitmore summoned her to the 72nd floor. No explanation, only, "Mr. Cross needs to see you, urgently." She stepped into the surveillance control room, the hub of every camera in the building. Nathaniel stood with his back to her. the glow of the monitors casting his silhouette against the wall. "Do you know what I just watched?" His voice was low, not cold. This time, it sounded wounded. Alina shook her head, hands trembling. He pressed a button, a video played, her in his office, kneeling on the floor, clutching his coat, whispering his name. That raw, private moment now flickered across a screen like an indictment. Her face drained of color. I didn't know there was a camera in there." "Exactly. That's the only room not recorded, but that night the backup system activated due to irregular movement. A security staffer saved the footage, and..." He looked at her not like a CEO evaluating an employee, but like a man seeing the pain of a woman in its purest form. "It was leaked." Elena sank into the chair as if her bones could no longer hold the weight of shame. Her pulse thundered, each beat louder than the last. In her mind, the whispers from the kitchen became roars, cruel echoes clawing at the corners of her self-worth. She knelt over his coat like a lovesick girl from a bad novel. She'd tried to ignore it, but now it was undeniable. "So?" she managed to ask, voice shaking. "Are you firing me?" Nathaniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the control panel and hit the building-wide intercom. "All staff, main hall, now." 10 minutes later, Elena stood to the side, surrounded by eyes. Some curious, some mocking, others pitying. Nathaniel entered, his gaze swept across the room, landing on a man near the back, the guard, Louis. "You leaked that footage?" The man began sweating. I thought it was just a bit of fun." "You're fired, immediately." Silence, absent. Nathaniel turned to the rest. "Let me be clear. Ms. Elena Rivera is not just a caregiver. She is someone I trust, someone I love." The words dropped like thunder. Elena stared at him. Everyone else lowered their eyes. Nathaniel's public declaration cast a protective shield over Elena. In that moment, she was defended, seen, named, acknowledged, not just as a caregiver, but as someone he loved. And that, paradoxically, was what frightened her the most. Elena wasn't used to being at the center. All her life, she'd stood back, made space for the chosen ones. Prettier girls, louder voices, easier names. She'd learned how to live quietly, work hard, expect nothing. So when Nathaniel declared his love in front of dozens of people, it didn't instantly bring her joy. It brought panic. The fear that she wouldn't be enough to hold on to something so fragile. The fear that everyone else was right. This was just a phase. A moment of emotional impulse from a man who had been alone for too long. That fear didn't scream. It seeped in. At Crosstech's annual charity gala, Elena arrived at Nathaniel's side. His hand rested lightly on her back as he introduced her to board members, his expression full of pride. The more people congratulated her, the heavier her chest became. The grand ballroom, glittering gowns, the clink of crystal and murmurs of wealth. It all felt like a world she'd been allowed to borrow for a night. She passed a trio of women with curled blonde hair and diamond earrings. Who even is she? New girlfriend? Pity fling. He always had a soft spot for lost little girls. Elena kept smiling, but something inside her buckled, not because they insulted her, but because a part of her believed them. She slipped out before the dancing began. Nathaniel was still deep in conversation with investors. She didn't want to disturb. Don't be a burden. The oldest rule in her survival guide. And in that glittering room full of power and pride, she felt like a shadow among stars. The next day, she grew quiet. Leo noticed first. He didn't ask. He just held her hand a little longer before bedtime. Nathaniel noticed on day 2. He asked 3 times. She smiled, said, "I'm fine," each time. By the 3rd night, he knocked on her door. She didn't open right away, but he didn't leave. "I know what you heard at the gala," he said through the wood. His voice was hoarse. "I heard it too, 3 steps away, every word." Elena opened the door. Just a crack. but enough for hallway light to spill over his tired face. "I didn't say anything," she whispered. "That's the problem. You pulled away." "I didn't want to be a burden." He paused. "A burden? You're the first person to make Leo laugh. The only one who's ever made me want to leave the office and eat breakfast. That's a burden?" She turned away. Her eyes brimmed. "You think I'm doing all of this on a whim? You think I let someone into my world out of pity?" Silence. Only the soft hum of the vents. Don't let cheap words from people who've never known real love steal what we're building. For the first time, he didn't command. He didn't plan. He just stood there, heart open. Elena looked at him for a long time. Then she opened the door wider. Not because she was certain, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted to believe in that gaze, that unsteady voice. She wanted to believe in someone. After that night, Elena didn't answer, but she no longer pushed Nathaniel away. They started again, not with grand gestures, but with small things, a soft glance while brewing morning coffee, a brush of hands while arranging Leo's toys. Everything between them was no longer accidental. It was chosen. Nathaniel learned to sit in silence beside her without needing control. Elena learned to be near him without needing armor. And Leo, as if sensing it all, laughed more, spoke more. Every giggle was a sign that their wounds were healing. One late afternoon, they took Leo to the park. Nathaniel held Elena's hand while crossing the street, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked at him and whispered, "You're not like them." "I don't want to be," he replied. "I want to be like you." A week later, when Elena opened a drawer to retrieve her journal, she found a small velvet box tucked inside. She looked up. Nathaniel stood in the doorway. He didn't kneel. He simply walked to her, took her hand, and whispered, "I've spent years locking the world out, but with you, I want to build one from scratch. I don't need the world's permission. I just need you. In every morning, in every quiet night." Elena said nothing. She just nodded, tears falling like the softest rain of early summer. It wasn't a traditional proposal. It was a promise from a man who never knew how to love and a girl who never believed she deserved to be. On the rooftop of Crosstech, overlooking the endless Manhattan skyline, a quiet, sacred space had been prepared for the small ceremony. No choir, no long aisles, no press, just a floral arch of white, soft golden lights and about 20 closed souls surrounding them. Elena stepped through the glass doors, hand in hand with Leo, the little boy in a tiny suit carrying the ring pillow. Her wedding dress was simple, elegant, like her soft white lace hugging her frame, hair pinned back loosely, no flashy jewelry, only a trembling smile at the corner of her lips. Nathaniel stood beneath the arch, eyes fixed on her as if the world outside ceased to exist. When they joined hands, the wind-up high brushed past gently, carrying the scent of flowers and the breath of something about to begin. The officiant smiled. "Nathaniel, do you have words to share?" He nodded, eyes never leaving Elena. "Before you entered my life, everything was in order but colorless. I was existing, not living. What you brought me wasn't just love, it was life." He paused, his voice dropped, slightly shaken. "I vow to love you when it's easy and when it's hard, when we understand each other and when we don't. I vow to protect you, to honor you, and never let you feel alone again." Then it was Elena's turn. She tightened her grip on his hands, tears shimmering. "I never thought I'd be here, but today, I'm not just marrying a man. I'm marrying someone who truly saw me when I was just a quiet girl in a quiet room." Leo handed them the rings. Both their hands trembled, not from nerves, but from emotion. As the pronouncement was made, as their first kiss as husband and wife touched their lips, the whole of Manhattan seemed to pause just for them. On their wedding night, after the guests had left and Leo had fallen asleep, Elena returned to her new room, no longer a guest room or staff quarters. This was hers. On the bed lay a familiar notebook, worn with frayed corners. The diary where she once poured her loneliness and secret longings. A page was tucked into the back. Nathaniel's handwriting. I once saw you through a camera, but I didn't fall in love with what I saw. I fell in love with everything you never tried to show. Elena laughed softly through her tears. She turned to the same camera. Once a symbol of control, now just a quiet companion blinking gently in the dark. This time, she smiled back. Just a quiet smile sent to the man who had truly seen her. And this time, she smiled back.